My dear wizards, witches, muggles, and squibs. Here I am. Today, your charming adventurer wizard will take you to the very heart of magic, where the values of friendship, loyalty, and kindness shine like a cauldron of gold at the end of a rainbow. Yes, today we'll be talking about the warmest and most generous of Hogwarts' four founders, the magnificent Helga Hufflepuff. Helga, with her radiant smile and always ready to lend a helping hand, or perhaps a delicious slice of pumpkin tart, is the soul who taught Hogwarts that there's a place for everyone, quite literally. But don't think she was just a masterful cook, but also an exceptional witch, capable of bringing a smile even to the gloomiest of spirits. And what about her most treasured artifact, the Hufflepuff Cup? An object that went down in history as a symbol of generosity and perseverance. Yet, as with all powerful magical objects, it carried with it an air of mystery and, alas, a dark fate. Let me guess, does it have something to do with a certain pale, flat-nosed wizard and his obsession with Horcruxes? Exactly. But for once, let's leave the darkness aside, because today we're talking about Hufflepuff, where hard work, loyalty, and friendship are the true requirements for being welcomed. But before we begin, the usual question: who's your favorite Hufflepuff and why? Let me know in the comments. And now, may today's story begin. In the shadowed folds of a forgotten Welsh valley, where the mist lingers like a memory and the hills speak in whispers, a young witch once grew beneath the watchful eye of a man who was never truly her kin. Her name was Helga. Small in stature, soft of voice, but possessed of a quiet tenacity that would one day make her legend. She had no parents to speak of, none she could remember. She had been found, barely more than a babe, nestled in the roots of an ancient ash tree, swaddled in rough wool and clinging to a curious object, a golden cup, gleaming even in the rain. The man who took her in, if such a word could be generously used, was a reclusive sorcerer known in the region for both his power and his temper. His name was Morwen the Grim. He was not gentle, he did not smile, but he gave her a roof and in time a place by the fire, if not yet in his heart. Helga watched him closely, absorbing his magic like moss drinks in the damp. She had an instinctive gift for healing, nettle poultices, cooling charms, the subtle hum of restorative runes.
She'll be well.
Morwen taught through silence, but Helga learned through presence. Each day, she was made to practice the disarming spell, Expelliarmus. A flick of the wrist, wand at the ready, again and again. A flawless disarm was all it took to end any conflict, or so he insisted.
An Expelliarmus at the right moment is worth more than any blasted curse.
Old Morwen muttered, his tone always sharp with a touch of disdain. Yet it was not from him that she learned kindness. That came from another, smaller, older, and far more spirited. The household's elf, a creature bound by magic, yet guided by love, became her true companion. His name was Twilin, and he was a remarkable cook, by any standard, wizard or muggle. And to Helga, his kitchen was a place of wonder. From him, she inherited a passion for flavor, for warmth, for the alchemy of food shared in good company. More than that, he showed her the quiet dignity of care, of nursing sick creatures back to health, of tending hens as gently as one might cradle an infant bird. With him, she laughed. With him, she learned the kind of magic that cannot be taught by wand alone. And so, beneath grey skies, and in the flickering light of hearth and herb, the girl with the golden cup began to shape the woman she would one day become. It was on an afternoon heavy with stillness, the kind that settles before a storm, that a stranger arrived at the edge of the valley. Cloaked in smoke-grey wool and veiled in whispers, she was known in distant parts as the Pale Witch of Blackbriar.
The witch!
A name spoken with caution, as though the syllables themselves carried ill fortune. Her presence, rare and unsought, stirred the quiet hills like a blade through silk. She came not by chance. She was searching for a child, for a relic, for something lost that had once belonged to her, or so she believed. The Golden Cup of Helga. the path led her to the crooked door of Morwen the Grim, nestled beneath ivy and thyme. There, in the flickering light of the hearth, she found a girl, small, warm-eyed, with flour on her fingers and kindness in her voice.
Good morning.
There was a pie cooling on the sill, pumpkin and cinnamon. But kindness, as the stranger soon made clear, was not a language she cared to understand.
Speak, child.
Her words turned sharp. She asked of the cup.
Where is the cup?
Her eyes burned with obsession. Her wand rose with the cold promise of pain.
Hand it over.
She had underestimated the girl. Helga had trained, in secret, in silence, in stubborn hope. A single spell, over and over, until the wand felt like an extension of her will. And when the moment came, when the air cracked with threat, she met it with unshaking resolve. The wand flew from the stranger's grasp. Her fury, unchecked, spilled forth, not with magic this time, but with venomous truth.
I know your kind.
She had known Helga's family, the Hufflepuffs of Welsh blood, a distinguished lineage of skilled witches and wizards of ancient descent. She had hunted them, had watched their house burn beneath the weight of her ambition. But they had managed to hide from her their final heir, young Helga, along with their most precious treasure. The girl before the witch was the last of that line, a living ember of a forgotten fire. When the old woman lunged, it was not the girl who fell, but the attacker herself, felled by Morwen, who had seen enough. His spell struck with grim precision, and the pale witch of Blackbriar crumpled to the floor, defeated not by violence, but by the resilience of the life she had tried to snuff out. In the quiet that followed, something shifted. Morwen, for all his sternness, understood what must come next. The girl he had found beneath the ash tree was no longer a child of the valley alone. The winds of her past had begun to stir, and with them, a longing for truth, for belonging,
Helga,
for purpose.
my child,
She would have to leave.
it's time you left.
With Twillin at her side, wrapping a parcel of bread and sweet root pies, and Morwen standing silent in the doorway, Helga Hufflepuff stepped beyond the hedgerow path she had always known.
Thanks for everything.
She carried the golden cup, wrapped in linen, and something far rarer, a sense of who she might become. For the briefest moment, the heirloom appeared to shimmer. Or was it merely a trick of the light? Her journey had begun, not toward glory nor vengeance, but something gentler and deeper. Understanding of her lineage, of her name, of what it meant to be the last of her house, and perhaps, in time, the founder of a new one.
Did you know that exclusive Spellbook Chronicles booklets are now available? Ancient volumes filled with secrets just like the ones hidden in the restricted section. But instead of hiding from Madam Pince, all you need is a click. This Muggle technology is amazing. Each booklet contains one of the most beloved stories from the series, enriched with exclusive images. So, what are you waiting for? Start collecting them all. Your support is invaluable. Not only will you enjoy the magic, but you'll also be supporting the channel, allowing us to keep bringing you the most amazing stories, like the one in this episode. So, enjoy the show.
And so, she traveled. With the golden cup secured in linen and memory, Helga Hufflepuff set forth beyond the borders of the valley that had cradled her youth. Her path led her through wild and whispering lands, across the wind-carved moors of Cymru, the rain-soaked woodlands of ancient Albion, and the frost-bitten coasts touched by the long shadows of Viking sails. She followed whispers, fragments, symbols etched into stone and song, traces of a lost house, her house,
Beyond the moors,
the House of Hufflepuff.
old ruins.
In time, she found it, what remained of it.
At last.
Half buried in earth and moss, far to the north, the crumbled ruins of a once great dwelling stood silent beneath the stars. Vines crept over its broken arches. Nature had reclaimed what man had left behind.
Greetings.
But the magic lingered still, old, patient, and sad.
You know this place, don't you?
There among the stones, she met an old witch.
Yes.
No name, only presence.
Oh, yes.
A quiet soul who had outlived her stories, but not forgotten them.
Hufflepuff.
She spoke of the past in riddles and rhymes, her voice as brittle as frost. If the legends were true, and in those lands, truth often wore the cloak of legend, then the cup Helga carried was no mere heirloom. It was a vessel of ancient power, older than the house that once protected it. The cup, if wielded by one who was worthy, could touch the very edges of what magic itself declared impossible.
I never imagined this.
Many centuries later, these would be named the 5 principal exceptions to Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration. The immutable borders of magic: food, money, information, love, and life itself.
I wonder,
Could the cup truly defy such limits?
am I worthy?
Helga did not know, nor did she know whether she, in heart and in deed, would be counted worthy of such a gift.
So much power.
She walked on.
In my hands.
It was during the white hush of a bitter snowstorm, somewhere in the highlands, sheltered, waiting for it to pass, that she encountered another traveler, a young woman, pale, weary, and frozen to the bone after enduring the harshest of tempests.
Wanderer!
Helga did not hesitate
This way!
and welcomed her into her humble refuge, warming her with conversation, with her smile,
Be my guest.
and with a stew of rabbit, onions, and cinnamon, one of the finest recipes the elf Twilin had ever taught her.
Let's eat.
The woman stirred beneath the fur blanket and opened her eyes, sharp and dark as ravens.
My name
She said little,
is Helga.
but the way she looked at Helga spoke volumes. Her name was Rowena, a young witch from the ancient lands of Caledonia, a seer, long on the road, long in search of something, just like Helga.
Thank you.
And so, in the warmth of the hearth and the sharp scent of cinnamon, the first thread of a strong and lasting bond, one of those friendships still fondly remembered in the wizarding world, was quietly woven. The two witches, both ambitious, both driven by the desire to better themselves for the good of the wizarding world, and both still hopeful, despite the growing bitterness toward muggles in those dark times, chose to journey together, to protect one another, to learn from each other, and to pursue their goals side by side, as friends and as sisters. The prodigious pair, whose fame had already begun to echo across the Isle, could not yet know that their travels were nearing their end, for something far greater than either of them could imagine. Before long, they would cross paths with none other than Godric Gryffindor, a sword-wielding wizard whose renown as an adventurer was already nearing legend, and, shortly thereafter, with Salazar Slytherin, a Parselmouth and sorcerer of extraordinary skill who had traveled across the known world.
Join us?
A better world.
A world
A world
of
of balance.
A world of
A world of peace.
peace.
Yes.
And so, from a spark in the brilliant mind of her friend Rowena, the idea of a school for young witches and wizards, a place where they could be shaped for the future, where they could be guided in the cultivation of their magical gifts, began to take form. The Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry was about to become a reality.
It's on us.
They chose the Scottish Highlands for their school, a place hidden from Muggle eyes and rich with a rare, pure energy, ancient magic. None could tame such power alone, but together, through powerful charms and spells, they laid foundations as solid as the castle itself, impenetrable and shielded from Muggle threat. Any non-magical wanderer in those mountains would see only a bleak, forbidding ruin, warning them to stay away. It was the year 993 AD, and the Epic of Hogwarts was beginning. But with it came great responsibility. How to choose which students were worthy. Each founder had a clear vision.
Welcome, little ones.
They agreed every young witch or wizard with magic should be welcomed,
Each of you
but each would be guided by one founder,
guided by one
chosen
voice.
for their unique traits. For Helga, the true values were those quietly passed down to her by the old Morwen, as well as by the house elf Twilin, and they had guided her every step so far. Helga had never fully known the principles of her fallen house, but from that moment on, the name Hufflepuff would embody those very values, her values, dedication and hard work, but also loyalty, friendship, warmth and equality. And why not? A love for the smallest things, the everyday details often dismissed as irrelevant by greater wizards. Morning chatter at first light, sharing a slice of rhubarb tart and a glass of fresh milk before setting off to work. This was Hufflepuff. Despite Salazar's stern belief that magic was a gift and honor reserved only for purebloods, Helga fought fiercely from the start, supported by Rowena and Godric, to welcome into the school anyone capable of wielding magic.
She's ready.
Pureblood, half-blood, or muggle-born. What did it matter? They were just words, barriers the world used to divide. Hogwarts was built to unite. For that reason, Helga also chose to welcome any house elf who needed a place where they could feel valued, a place to call home. After all, who better than them in the kitchens? House elves loved to cook.
How is it?
For them, creating something good for others, bringing a smile to their faces, was a daily commitment.
Good.
And so, from the very early days of the school, Helga and the house elves enlivened the castle's kitchens, crafting dishes so delicious that they are still served to students today. Roast pork ribs with honey and mustard, wild chicken pie with pumpkin, red onions and chestnuts, potato bread with wildflowers, and much more. In its early years, Hogwarts flourished, its renown spreading across Europe. But even Helga knew that unity was fragile, that one day bonds might fray, and the warmth of shared purpose be swallowed by silence. As time passed, old conflicts, long buried for the sake of the school, began to resurface.
Ah, there you are, my beloved viewers. Fear not, I'll be quicker than a golden snitch. First of all, I want to thank you all for being here for this episode of the Spellbook Chronicles. And if you think Quentin Pendragon is charming enough to deserve your generous support, you might consider leaving a like. And I highly recommend subscribing to the channel too, clicking the bell icon to make sure you don't miss a single episode. And why not, joining the channel to get priority access to every new video for just a couple of galleons. So, what are you waiting for?
Is that all you aim to be, Helga?
Day by day, Rowena argued more fiercely with her daughter Helena, their bond fraying with every exchange. Meanwhile, Godric and Salazar were locked in ever fiercer disputes. Salazar's bitterness growing towards anyone with the faintest Muggle connection, while Godric increasingly yearned to draw his wand and settle matters with dueling fire. Something was shifting beneath the surface. The dream of love and brotherhood suddenly seemed fragile, delicate, as though it might shatter with the slightest provocation. Helga, reflecting on her own past, understood simply that this too must be accepted. It was a natural part of life itself. And so, for the first time since she was a child, the Hufflepuff cup began to glow once more,
Curious.
ready to bestow its magical essence upon its worthy bearer.
Very curious.
What followed is shrouded in mystery. There are no concrete proofs, only whispers. For many, it remains a legend. Yet, according to the studies of numerous magical historians, there exists a chamber deep within the heart of Hogwarts. A secret room. The Room of Requirement, as it came to be known. Also called the Come and Go Room. Hidden away on the 7th floor, in the left corridor of the castle, opposite a tapestry depicting Barnabas the Barmy's ill-fated attempt to teach trolls ballet. The entrance appeared only when someone was in great need. This room possessed a singular power. It could provide or transform itself into whatever a witch or wizard required at that precise moment. To enter, one had only to walk past it 3 times whilst concentrating on their need, and the door would reveal itself. True to its name, the Room of Requirement was a sanctuary of possibility, morphing to meet the needs of those who sought it. Many believe this chamber to be Helga's true legacy to the school and its students. A place forged from the very magic and power of her cup. A place that transcended the limits of magic itself, one that only the rightful bearer of the Hufflepuff cup could bring forth. A refuge for all who simply needed help, a haven that would stand unwavering, no matter how fierce the storms outside. In the end, it was not just the magic of the cup or the strength of its bearer that mattered, but the quiet conviction that even in a world divided, kindness and sanctuary remain the truest forms of power.
And here we are at the end, my loyal friends. As today's story reminds us, remember, it doesn't matter which house represents you. Each of us can carry a little bit of Helga Hufflepuff in our hearts, sharing kindness, and why not a meal cooked with love, and perhaps an anti-diabetes potion. I'm Quentin Pendragon, your adventurer wizard, and once again I thank you for sharing this journey with me, Spellbook family, and I'll see you in the next marvelous episode.